Hello, and welcome to Talk the Walk. I'm Azam Khan. Environmental, social, and governance, or ESG, has become an essential part of business, investment, and policies, a framework used to assess practice, performance, sustainability, and ethical issues, all of which are becoming more important factors for individuals and governments alike. But as ESG credentials become more mainstream, they also become more susceptible to wider market dynamics, as we're seeing now, particularly in Europe and in the US. ESG also has constantly evolving indicators, as well as varying approaches at different parts of the world with different regulatory standards. And like anything relatively new, has issues with scams and frauds to weed out. So how are companies keeping up to date with practices? And how significant are ESG credentials? Joining me to break down the topic is Andrew Lau, Director for ESG Advisory in Asia at Colliers, a global real estate agency. Mr. Lau, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me.
Hi, thanks, Hassan. Nice to meet you.
For a lot of businesses, especially small to medium-sized businesses, ESG is a difficult task. It requires manpower. There's cost. So can you just share with us a little bit about the process of being up to date in ESG for companies?
Yes, I think, first of all, it's not that difficult. I have to say it's just a collaboration between the peers and external stakeholders to supplement the skills and the resources. But I think it's more important for the business owner to understand the risk for not doing so, because right now the globally has demand a better impact to the environment, climate, as well as the society. So how to disclose and how to do better in the ESG is becoming a main theme for the next many years to come. So it is important for companies to equip everyone of their employee with the company direction, how they can make a positive impact to the environment, to the society, and embed the ESG into the DNA of their operation, transform their business into alignment with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals as a very common language for everyone to discuss. And then it will slowly become a ESG ready business. So instead of thinking about just how much it costs and how much manpower it takes, I think it becomes an essential task for all the business owner to transform their business to get it ready.
Yeah, you say it's an essential thing to get ready. Not looking at the cost, but what is the incentive aside from obviously the important things you just pointed out, the ethical practices, the social impact it has in communities, and all of that. So, but then what other than that are there incentives to do ESG?
Yeah, definitely. I think there's a lot of motivation besides the obvious reason that we just discussed.
Yeah.
First of all, for Hong Kong, for example, all the listed companies are mandating to disclose their carbon emission. So all of this company will have to demand their suppliers, the supply chain, to give them the data. So getting the data ready is become like a regular demand from all the listed company, and as well as the multinational company as well. So for them, in order to become like ESG compliance, they need the data to support them. So getting the data there will actually help them to continue their businesses as current, or even gaining momentum to gain more businesses compared to those that didn't get them ready. So that's one thing. Second thing is about the opportunity. So transforming into a low carbon economy actually create a lot of business opportunity for small and medium size of businesses, particularly the local business that help to upcycle material, helping on the circular economy. It becomes a strong demand from the market, helping the whole city to decarbonize, turning it into a low carbon operation. So all this come with the opportunity for them to become like ESG compliance at the same time to gaining more business from this program and operation. So I think this already has a strong pull factor. At the same time, we haven't talked about is the government policies and taxation. It is obvious that when the government trying to achieve carbon neutrality, they need everyone to contribute to this overall program. And it is become mandatory later on for all the small and medium size of company also to disclose their carbon emission as well as to reduce their overall carbon footprint. And particularly for the social aspect, because when the social is not stable, it has become difficult for all the operation to become ESG ready, like helping the carbon reduction or helping the environment. So this is one of the obvious reasons that helping the small and medium size of business to go on to this journey earlier.
Right. That's interesting. You mentioned the carbon disclosure. That's a big mandate, especially in Hong Kong and in the country China. Are there other examples of other mandates which are important to Hong Kong and this region versus factors and credentials that differ in other parts, in other markets like in the UK, in Europe or in the US?
Yeah, Hong Kong right now is trying to take a acceleration approach in order to catch up with other European or even the US market in terms of ESG. So the Hong Kong Exchange has mandated a mandatory carbon disclosure following a framework called TCFD, which stands for Task Force for Climate-Related Financial Disclosure. So in order to get it ready, all the listed companies have to do a climate assessment to their business. So how does the climate impact their business? And also how does their business operation also impacting the climate through the nature? So it's a two-sided approach. In order to do so is recognize a lot of opportunity associated with from the Scope 1, Scope 2, and Scope 3 carbon emission data for the company operations. And overall, I think China is also trying to accelerate the process by strengthening the requirements on carbon disclosure and carbon reduction, and also having some of the carbon trading platform available in the market to help each of the company to achieve their target with financial incentive. So this is one of the things that Hong Kong Exchange is also looking into and getting ready, setting up the carbon trading mechanism so that to prepare for what is coming. And speaking of that, we are also proposing a waste charging scheme. Even though it's been there for a few years, it will slowly become mandatory very soon. And it's following all this upcycling and circular economy concept in UK and also in Europe, so that to help us reduce our reliance on the natural resources. And this becomes very important because Hong Kong, as a small city, we don't have a lot of natural resources available. So we're really relying on importing, and it becomes a burden for us in terms of carbon emission. So it is very important for us to recognize how much resources we need in order to maintain our financial market as well as business as usual, to build a commercial world without having too much burden to the nature and the society.
Right. And Colliers obviously is a global real estate agency. I just wanted to get your thoughts on how ESG differs in real estate and the field that you guys focus on versus other fields. Like, what are some key things that are different in that aspect?
Thank you very much for this question. I think Colliers is trying to also doing the acceleration mode. Colliers is actually not the front runner in terms of ESG and sustainability, but after 3 consecutive years of launching, we call the impact report. It's based on a global initiative called Elevate the Built Environment, which is how we are going to help our clients, particularly the investors and also the property assets that we manage, to accelerate their decarbonization journey. And in particular, we have set up this ESG Advisory platform to help our client to accelerate their program with the angle that helping them increase the asset value. So speaking of that, like our ESG Advisory is under the valuation advisory team, which is give us a very strong angle to help our client to not just doing the good things, but actually doing something that increase the value of their assets. Real estate is always seen as a low risk and long-term investment. But after all this climate incident recently, we find that it's no longer the case for some of the locations, particularly they're subject to severe climate risk. So they will become a high-risk investment for some of the investors. So one of the jobs that we are doing is helping our clients to mitigate all these risks, to make sure that all the investment future return is protected. At the same time, the impact from the investment and also the operation of the building is also future-proof. So we understand how the global environment demanding the ESG, so that we can help our client to set up programs such as like energy carbon reduction, as well as social engagement, tenant engagement, and all this health and well-being program.
You touched on well-being, and I feel like it's becoming more and more of an important aspect of ESG, especially after the pandemic, and the way the workforce and the work culture has changed and is evolving. So what was some impact in the well-being factor that you guys have made with regards to Hong Kong specifically, or the region?
Yeah, I think when we look at ESG, we always think about, okay, environmental and social and governance, right? So from the environmental, we actually look at not just how we protect the environment, but it's the healthiness and the health status of the environment. So we are making a lot of damages to the nature. So we are trying to reverse that, or actually making a positive impact to that. But at the same time, from the social topic, we look at the people. People are important, and also people are the biggest assets nowadays. In particular, with all the advance in AI technology, is the market is actually demanding an even higher quality of talent to work for them. So how to help them to increase their productivity, to help them to reduce their stress, to help them to improve their quality of work. So this is what we focus in the health and well-being program for a building. So in Hong Kong particular and in Colliers, we have achieved a WELL HSL rating for our offices, and we are looking at the full WELL certification in the coming future. So we have introduced a lot of wellness program and continuously improving for the ergonomics of the furniture, for the work from home policy, so that to allow our colleagues to have flexible working style. And from the collaboration culture, from all this healthy diet, fruit, water, and also all the nutrition label to help them to make a better choice into day-to-day life. And also to encourage them to reduce their carbon emission by helping them reduce the plastic use in the takeaway lunch boxes. We also introduce a lot of, I would say, we don't call it social and volunteer work anymore, but more like a social impact work, asking our colleagues to join the team together to help, let's say, the beach cleaning, the Food Angel program to help the one in need. All this contribute to the UN SDGs that we mentioned, so that to help them engage, what does it mean for them to impact the overall global environment in terms of environment and social impact, so that they can feel they are part of the journey.
I'm going to pause you right there while we go for a quick break. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back with Andrew Lau. Stay tuned. Welcome back to Talk the Walk. I'm speaking with Andrew Lau, Director for ESG Advisory in Asia for Colliers. Mr. Lau, the Hong Kong government has also recently announced extra platforms and services to help bolster ESG, particularly for small businesses. Can you assess the city's, just the general capabilities when it comes to ESG, and what advantages it may have in gaining an edge in foreign markets?
Yeah, I think the Hong Kong government is on the right track, like definitely helping a lot of small businesses that help them to get on this ESG journey. I mentioned previously about the global is demanding all the carbon disclosure and also all the environmental policy benefits, also impact. So for the small businesses, in order to gain advantage from in the global market, they actually need to become ESG ready. We want to put it as a simple way. So for doing so, there will be some investment, but more on the education and the change management. So this is where the governments can chip in particularly by setting the benchmark and perfect example. Doing by example is a perfect way to educate all the small businesses owner to let them know that why we can make an impact, and by doing so, what kind of advantage they can gain. So I also mentioned that there's a requirement for this company to disclose their carbon emission. So that for these small businesses, first of all, they really need to review their impacts to the carbon emissions, to the environment, and also to the society. From doing that, they can assess some of the green finance opportunities. They may be able to install some of the renewable energy with the benefits of the feed-in tariffs that's also subsidized by the government. And they also can do a lot of energy reduction program, energy saving project with subsidies from the government as well. So with all this in place, actually, I think the small businesses owner can get on this ESG journey easier.
Right, and because ESG is still, a constantly evolving concept and it's relatively new, there's a lack of, I guess, framework for regulation, particularly a universal one. Each region in the world goes through their own, and they're still figuring it out. So, can you talk about the need, or what do you say to critics who say that the framework is not coherent, whether it's the criteria itself, and the regulation itself is also something that needs work on?
Yeah, I think you mentioned it very well. For the past 20 years, I'm doing the same thing, is to localize the requirement from the global demand, which is usually Europe or the US, to the local, regional, which is the Asia need, because we are very different. For example, the temperature, the atmosphere, and the readiness, people knowledge in ESG are all different. So one thing is we really have to figure out what is the principle from all this global regulation and framework, and then we set up a mechanism locally how to fulfill the requirements. So a lot of the area is still new, as you mentioned, and it's constantly evolving, and it requires a very steep learning curve. So the things that we do and we talk about previously, like in the last few years, may not be the same this year forward because the requirements has changed. And because the carbon reduction journey is not as good as we thought, it's actually one of the very hot topic nowadays because of the continuous hot days we are experiencing. So we see that the climate is already responding to our human activity very significantly. So that's why I think we are no longer having just a target to achieve carbon zero or carbon neutral. We're actually trying to race to zero. So which company wins in the future is actually the one who can achieve carbon zero earlier. So all the regulation comes with will have to mandate, first of all, this disclosure of this data. Second of all, to do the bare minimum standard so that all these criteria have met, protect the environment and protect the impact to the society so that we can make a more sustainable future for the city to go. So Hong Kong government is learning, as we discussed, but I believe that the good people will always find a way to resolve it with the help of technology. So this is another angle that we're always looking into because for the past few years during pandemic, a lot of research on technologies have been conducted, but have not been fully implemented and tested in a real case situation. And after the pandemic, we see a strong acceleration on that aspect, particularly on ESG. So we can see that the technology 3 years down the road will change significantly. And we believe that with the advance in technologies, we can eventually get to where we want to be, to become more like climate resilience, having a positive impact to the nature and to the society.
Right. And there's been a lot of reports on the explosion in greenwashing and scams that in a lot of ways plagues the ESG globally. So what are ways that can be better monitored and dealt with, particularly in Hong Kong, which is trying to become a green finance hub? So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, this is a very interesting question. I just had a similar conversation recently with a rating company, ESG rating company, and they find it's also very difficult to actually avoid completely on the greenwashing because it's very easy for a company to hide some of the key facts and key data so that you cannot assess like how bad they do. But greenwashing technically means that you are just saying the good thing and not saying the bad thing. This is one of the major issues with greenwashing, and it's happening every day. In order to avoid that, I think it's very important for us to have the change mindset. It is because we always, as a maybe as an Asian, trying to be conservative, and the way we are doing things, we are trying to protect our own interest. But one of the UN SDG is actually trying to help us or suggest us to collaborate to success. So we should utilize each of our own strength, our professional, so that we are less abuse the natural resources. We don't have to double do the same thing that other already been doing, so that we can achieve a common goal, working hard on it. And this is part of the way to avoid greenwashing. And data transparency and governance is very important. And for the investment and the investors to understand the difference, becomes a key factor for the rating company and a valuation company like us in order to provide insight to how the investor to make an informed decision. Because I think ESG has a qualitative approach and a quantitative approach, and so a lot of times it's become sometimes it becomes difficult to tell if a company or even a real estate they are ESG ready. A certification may not mean everything, but it means something. So that we will give a rating according to the level of achievement, the type of certification that a building has achieved, in order to give them risk on ESG. And from doing so, more data available to investors, it will slowly avoid the greenwashing event or incident in the market, so that we can become the leader in the green finance hub. And I think the Hong Kong MA has made a very, very aggressive target to have 30% of the financial loan. It will become ESG related. So either a green loan or social related loan. So it is a very aggressive target, but at the same time, it's really meaningful for Hong Kong journey to become a leader in green finance. And it also requires a lot of training and education, knowledge sharing, so that people can understand better what is ESG mean and how everyone on us can contribute to the bigger goal.
There was a recent report by a funds tracking company that equity funds with ESG tilts have been losing investors, and the sector has been dragged into a rare net outflow, which was not seen as much before. And as you're someone who's been in this sector for a long time, so can you just talk about how now that ESG has become more mainstream and more integrated systemically, how is it going to be more susceptible to these larger market dynamics, and there's going to be a lot more turbulence per se when it comes to ESG investment?
In the ESG investment, we always look for different theme. So one way to do it is called impact investment. Some of the investors, they have their own belief. Let's say they do negative screening for all these negative social impact companies, such as like tobacco or alcohol or gambling. So those are become like one of the key focus for ESG investing. And I think it's going to become a mainstream of investment going forward. And I personally believe in 10 years' time, we don't call it ESG investing anymore. We just call it investing or impact investing, because we always want to make a positive impact to the environment and to the society. And the investment is one of the key driver for all this happening.
Right. Actually, I was going to ask. Sorry to interrupt you. I was going to ask you that about like what is the difference between social impact investing? That's something you also see more and more now. It's not as utilized or as, I guess, a household name as ESG. But I was going to ask you.
There's a definition difference, and I think it's become very difficult for the investors to justify the investment, because most of the time for social impact investment, it meaning that in making a positive social impact, literally, for the company and for the businesses that they're investing in, that including helping the single mom business, or helping the women in the leadership, or even helping to those in need. Sometimes it requires sacrifice. And how are they going to make profit in that is actually a very interesting topic. And our angle is when we do valuation of a real estate and a business, we also look at the long-term cash flow and also the sustainability of the business. And with this social impact business, they're actually making a positive effect to helping other business to generate the demand and the opportunity and create a positive ecosystem so that it will be slowly become sustainable. Even though they may not be making a strong profit today, they will become the main theme of business later on.
Andrew Lau, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me.
Thank you very much for having me today.
That's all for this time. I will see you same time next week. Goodbye.